All right, good evening, and welcome to class. And it's nice having you guys here again. So last week we talked about chapter 1. Talked about what are the titles in chapter 1 that we must consider, and I make a list of few of them. Of course, the chapter 1 of an average research work, maybe a thesis, dissertation, or whatever name you call it, deals with the contextual background, the background, the introduction to your work, where we talk about some people say background problem, some will call it contextual background, some will say just background to the study. Then the next subtitle is the statement of problem, while the next one is, after the statement of problem, we have some people put in research objective or purpose of the study, as it were. I said under purpose of the studies is primarily divided into two. We have the main and the specific purpose. Then after that, we can move to maybe research questions. In some cases, hypothesis can follow thereafter if there is need for it. Then I think I mentioned last week, if I don't mention it, but I will say it again, it just occurred to me that I should say it. I said hypothesis is a tentative statement. It's just to show we want to test for significance of anything. We'll get to that later on. After hypothesis, we move to rationale or significance of the study. Why is this study important to the likely stakeholders in that that the work is concerned about? Then we move to, after significance of the study, we talked about maybe some would say limitation. Some would say limitation. We have two different types of limitation when it comes to dissertation. There's a limitation that is at the beginning of the work that is not the same as the limitation at the end of the work. So in some schools they call it delimitation. That is, the people that call it delimitation, they are looking at, sometimes it's divided into two: geographical limitation, that is, some people will call it scope of your study, some will say delimitation. The delimitation is spelled DE, then limitation. So the delimitation or scope of the study, we are looking at what scope will your work cover. For instance, when we talk about it already, there should be an indication from your research title, the likely scope of your study. But your research title might not give the total scope, as it were. It might just be scope to a level, but it might not give the total scope of your study. And what do I mean by that is, in the scope of your study, in that chapter one, we might be looking at geographical scope and maybe participant scope. For people in public health, you might not need all of those scope in your chapter one. But in chapter 3, there's what we call inclusion and exclusion. We'll get to that for people in that space. But for people in social science, education, so you might be looking at scope of your study. So the scope could be geographical scope. For instance, for a study that we're looking at how stress affects students' academic performance in maybe Education District 4 of Lagos State, Nigeria. So you might not need to go that route, Lagos State, Education District 4, Lagos State, Nigeria. So you can just stop it, effect of maybe stress, academic stress on student academic performance, on student academic stress on performance in, maybe you can pick a particular subject, then link it to Education District 4 area of Lagos State. Now, that's the Education District 4 there is talking about geographical scope, while the subject scope is the maybe a particular class that you chose to work with. All of those things should be stated in your scope of the study. For instance, maybe you're looking at maybe a particular set of class, maybe XS1 student only, senior secondary school student only. So if you're looking at senior secondary school in what class, or you're taking it across all class, So we might want to check what scope are we talking about here. Are we looking at geographical scope in the sense that um, education district 4 is what we are looking at. Outside that, okay, senior secondary school students in this particular area. We are not just talking about, there are so many things that is under education district 4 of Lagos State, but we are focusing on senior secondary school students in that education district 4. So that defines your scope, capturing both the geographical scope as well as subject scope, that is the participant scope, kind of people you want to use for your study. So aside scope, we look at what we call definition of terms. How do I define my terms? All these things are applicable to some research in Nigeria, to some schools, institutions in Nigeria, but it might not be applicable internationally in most cases. So, but it's good you know both what is applicable here and what is applicable elsewhere too. That's what makes you an expert in the field when it gets to that stage, So that's how I could tell you between the two. It might be important in some schools here, but abroad it is not even in their list of what you should write about. But for the definition of terms, what that is practically telling us is what terms are you going to be using for your study? Now, people make mistake in this term. You just put something to Google. And please let me sound the note of warning. Don't try to make this mistake. Don't use definitions from Wikipedia. Please. Don't use definition from Wikipedia. As academia or as someone into academics, please avoid it. Avoid Wikipedia for your reference points and all of those things. It's not suitable in most cases. So what do I mean by definition of terms when we're talking about the terms used? For instance, what are the key terms in this topic that we mentioned: academic stress and student academic performance? We have students, we have academic stress, we have academic performance. Student, of course, I've mentioned that. If there are other stakeholders we feel important to that study, can define those things. But you shouldn't just use the English definition or yes, definition of those terms. Students, are you talking about, what kind of students are you talking about? Do you know from GSS1? Okay, maybe because of the new education policy now, GSS1 might not be categorized as student yet, but anybody from SS1 till postdoctorate, student na student, but it just get grade of student. You get it? So when you are defining students, you have to define it in a way it's applicable to your work. You define it in a way it is applicable to your work. That's how you define students. So if you are defining academic stress, what's the definition of academic stress to your type of work? Or in some schools, they might ask you to cite an author that the definition resonates with your own, that relates with your studies. You can go ahead and do that. So as somebody else define academic stress, all of those things, the definition must suit what your work is all about. So then the next one is academic performance. How is academic performance defined? In some cases, academic performance can be measured using students' score in a particular subject. It can also be measured by you giving tests to those students yourself and collating the results. So, but if you'll be giving tests to them, maybe you now have to limit yourself to maybe a particular subject. Don't let us go all those routes. It's a long route on its own. But I'm just trying to let you know that when you're defining your academic performance, it must be a definition that is suitable and adaptable to your study. So, any questions so far about what chapter 1 is all about? I'm going to make comment on your chapter 1 and send them back to you maybe latest by Monday. Any other question about your chapter 1 before we proceed to chapter 2? Oh yeah. Please ask your question, please. Is my OMB clothes? I've not put it up, so that's why I'm still in OMB format. I'm listening. Oh, please, who want to ask us question on the chapter? Okay, please go ahead, sir. Mention your name.
Okay. Taiwo.
Welcome, sir.
Okay. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
We are very grateful, sir, for your support.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I'm still on that objective of the purpose of the study, sir.
All right.
I'm really confused on the specific objective. Like our topic now, like that of the topic I mentioned last week, the effect of unemployment on unemployment rate in Nigeria economy. If I want to have a specific objective on that topic, how will I form it, sir?
Now, for your specific, there are studies that you just need one objective. But in this case, if you want to even have specific objectives, okay, you might look at, first, you could Google something like, what are the factors of unemployment?
Okay.
So you could Google something like, what are the factors of unemployment? What could cause unemployment?
Okay.
So if some of those factors caught your attention, can list them out and turn them to individual variables under unemployment.
Okay.
To now relate it to the Nigerian economy.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe one of the factors of unemployment could be maybe lack of infrastructure in the country, which electricity fall under.
Okay.
So you can say, okay, how has if you are doing a secondary study, because how you state your specific objective too matters. You can't state an objective in a way that it will be tending towards you using primary data, and you are now stating the objective in a primary data form, but the study is actually meant to use secondary data. Confusion is setting already.
Okay. There are ways by which we can state the specific objective in primary term and the secondary term, sir.
Yes, sir. You see, one of the good things that makes you a professional or an expert in writing academic work is, even by the time you're stating your objective, you know what tool you are going to use to analyze that objective.
Okay.
For instance, if you are looking at people's perception about something, this work you talked about, that effect of unemployment on Nigeria economy, do you know that we can do a primary study of it, not using secondary data, by just putting a particular word, the perceived effect.
Perceived effect. Okay.
So what that word perceived effect means is that maybe you're going to select a set of stakeholders that this thing is affecting and check their perception. How do they perceive what is causing unemployment and how it's relating to Nigeria economic situation?
Okay.
So with that, you've already put the word perception. So those variables that you itemize under unemployment, you're going to be designing a questionnaire to assess how do they perceive factors that relate to this, how do they perceive factors that relate to that, relating it to Nigeria economy.
Okay, sir.
So The dynamics of how you state your objectives, specific objectives, will show how vast you are when it comes to your data analysis. Because some people can just believe that, oh, AI has given me the objective, and AI just give you a generic objective. It might not be suitable for your work, or it might be bigger than your work.
Okay.
It can be bigger than the scope you want it to cover.
Okay.
So we need to be very careful when it comes to that. You have to be sure that, okay, if I had the intention from the beginning, even before I start putting up specific objective and all of that, I have the mindset that this work is going to be a secondary data work.
Okay.
So you must tailor your stuffs around that.
Okay.
Okay. Ayola want to say something? Okay. Any other question, please, concerning the chapter? I hope that is clear. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Who else is asking us a question? Okay, so can we move on to chapter 2 right now? I hope you are putting one or two things down. Although you can always, if I post this video on YouTube, you can always go back to check and make use of the video. Next, should I continue to chapter 2 right now?
Yes.
Okay, in the absence of any questions, so let's move on. Your chapter 2 talks primarily, is the focus on, majorly in Nigerian schools, you focus on literature review. For instance, before I joined this class, I was in a meeting with a student in the UK. So, and we were talking. So, of course, I was working with her on our research work. And when we started talking, I told her that our own work is just in 4 chapters. So we have the introduction, the methodology, analysis and report, then conclusion and recommendation. So they expunged the literature review part. But they didn't expunge it. They added it to the chapter 1. Some of the subtopic under our own chapter 1 is the contextual background. There's no even need for statement of problem. The next thing was the literature review. That is the theoretical underpinning or empirical studies that relate to the work. Then we now do objective and research questions and all of those things. So they move the chapter 2, as it were, here into a chapter 1 with our work and all of that. And that work is just about less than 10,000 words for the whole project. So, but the chapter 2 here basically talks about we call it literature review. What is the essence of your literature review? The literature review is there for you to, I subdivided into 3. I say under literature review, we have the theoretical review, we have the conceptual review, theoretical review, and empirical review of literature. Those 3 key sections must be covered in your work, even if you don't give them that outright titles. So, but your literature review must be seen covering that in most cases. Let me say it again. There are 3 key areas in your literature review, which is chapter 2. Talked about the conceptual review, theoretical review, and empirical review. So let me talk about each of these types of review. Now, the conceptual review primarily is for that section is for you to review what concept, how is it defined, what concept in your study, how is it defined. For instance, we are talking about the effect of academic stress. Academic stress is a concept that has been defined by various scholars. So you are going to bring those definitions together, the few ones you can gather. Okay, looking at how Mr. Taiwo defined academic stress, comparing it with how Eden define it, is there a synergy in their definition, or they think they are two different things and all of that? So you are trying to examine what concept, how is academic stress formed as a concept. So you can talk around that a bit and define academic concept itself. In some cases, in conceptual review, sometimes some people might want to draw a concept of your work. They might ask you to draw the conceptual framework. What that means is the conceptual framework is talking about how each of your variables, identified variables, linked to your dependent variable. How each of your independent variable is linked to your dependent variable. That's why you see the diagram. They will say, like that box, something I drew last week, if you remember. So if you don't remember, you can check our video on YouTube, the last week video. It's there. I uploaded it on the YouTube link on the YouTube page. So you can check it again. You'll see the link there. So what am I saying in essence is that the conceptual review is for you sometimes to review the concepts that your work is embedded in. What concept is your work focusing on? So that's what the conceptual framework is supposed to be. Sometimes some might talk about the history that led into that concept that you are using or examining. So that's conceptual review. Then after that, I said there are three major sections under conceptual review. Under literature review, conceptual review 1, 2 is theoretical review, then empirical review. Theoretical review now, we talk about what theory can you say relate with your work. For instance, in the case of academic stress, what academic theory can you use to back what you're talking of? But listen, when you're looking at academic theory, it's not just to quote any theory. What theory do you think can accommodate your variables that you're looking at in your study? And you must be able to justify it with empirical evidence. That this is why this theory, you feel this theory, or you think this theory is suitable for your work. What empirical emphasis has been made on the use of that theory, maybe in close mark with the type of variable you are looking at in your study. What have scholars said about the theory? What are the limitations of that theory? You have to dig deep with that theory. How is that theory applicable? The implication of that theory to your own work. You have to tell us, let us know. What are the implications of those theory to your own work? You need to look at it. Then when you have those theory, you link it to your maybe your concept or your variables in your study, and tell us, let us know why is this theory important to you, to this study. Using it, what contribution does this theory has to your work? What are the practical implications of that theory? First, in the line of the way you outlined your theoretical framework, you can first talk about what the theory is. Who propounded the theory? What's the purpose of that theory? Then when you talk about that, you now move to how is this theory linked to your work? In another paragraph, how is this study linked to your work? Theory links to your work. What is it talking about? What variable is it relating to in your own work? Then you now talk about, after that, you now talk about the implication of that theory to your work. Quoting scholars that have talked about how useful the theory is, or scholars that have in some way criticized the theory. Does the critique has to do with your own work? Does it affect your work or the variables in your work? That's why sometimes a theory might not be suitable enough to cover a whole variable or something you're talking about or what you're trying to discuss in your work. Sometimes some writers make use of one or two more theories to support each other, to really, so that you can really discuss what you intend discussing in your work. So please, and in doing all of this, you must be very sure of your citations. You must cite appropriately scholars that you're relating to, and don't go and use ChatGPT citation. It might be far, because you might be led wrongly. Please, I want to plead with you. Don't go and use ChatGPT citation. ChatGPT can cite a work that doesn't exist. It can cite a work, an author, and put another person's content as the reference. So be mindful of how you use ChatGPT. Of course, you can use it to write academic work, but there are skills in using ChatGPT or some of these AI tools in writing your work. Maybe one of the class I would like to share with you guys how I use AI sometimes when I want to write. All right. So let's move to the last part of literature review, which is chapter 2. We're talking about literature review now. We can look at areas. The third part is empirical review. So how do I do empirical review? Empirical review is a way that you're trying to examine what has been done before. What studies have been carried out before? What were their limitations? But some of those limitations you might be picking from to solving your own study in a way. So what was the past studies talking about? What are they talking about? What are the scholars that have discussed what you want to discuss in some way? What have they discussed? So you can relate studies, examine studies, look at the findings of study A, compare with study B. What can you deduce from it? What was the limitation of A and B? Or what limitations do they both have that, if carefully put into consideration, you can you won't want to make that same mistake. Maybe empirical problem they have, or just the problem with their approach to the study, maybe their research design problem. Can look at it. Okay, let me learn from their mistakes to better tweak my own to be a better one. That's the essence of empirical review of literature. Is for you to dig deep into past studies in what you're talking about. Might not be actually all the variables. It might just be a variable of it that one or two, three authors have talked about it, and you feel is related to your work. Don't forget, this empirical review is very, 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 very important to do them. Because if you don't do this, sometimes when you get to chapter 4 and you are doing analysis, you get to discussion of findings, and you want to discuss your findings, you need to refer back to some of the literature review, some of the authors, what they've said. They now see if your work corroborates with what they are saying or is against it. So that's where I don't want to go ahead of myself. I'm just trying to let us know that in empirical review, you review past studies. There are key things you review when you are writing review of past studies. Well, you look at what's the title of that work, what instrument was used, what was the findings. So apart from the findings, what limitation do the study encounter? What are the limitations? Is it theoretical limitation, empirical limitation, maybe analytical limitations, or design limitations? You can look at those things, criticize them. All right. Then in some cases, in that same literature review chapter, there might be summary of your literature review that is summarizing what your conceptual review, theoretical review, and empirical review talks about, and make sure you link them back to your objective of the study. That particular paragraph of summary of literature review. Any question about chapter 2? If you like me to answer any question for you, please. Anybody want to ask me any questions? So for people that will be watching this online, please you can check the details on the screen. I'm sorry, in the details of this video, you will get some of the stuffs, how you can link us, how you can join our group. We are creating a community. One of the things I'm going to do with the community later on, if I can share, is to have a pool of researchers, writers, where I can, there are opportunities that are coming my way sometimes that, I might not be available to do. I can just push it to the team. If anybody wants to do it and be paid for it. So those are some of the opportunities that will be coming up on that platform. So you can choose to stay, you can choose to join the platform, or you can choose to leave. It's voluntary. All right, any question on chapter 2? If I said something you don't understand, you want me to re-explain and all of that, just let me know, please. Any question? Any. Any questions, please?
Hello, sir.
All right, I'm with you, sir.
That the conceptual review, sir.
All right.
Let's take, for instance, we are looking at our topic
All right.
last week, sir.
All right.
What are the things that we need to look for there? Like academic stress.
Yes.
Are we going to talk about stress itself
You can talk about stress. Stress is a concept.
and academic performance?
Academic stress is a concept. Academic performance is a concept. You can talk about.
Okay, those are the
About the
three.
definition of those things. Yes.
Is
Yes.
that really enough, sir?
But to a large extent, is enough for your study.
Okay.
For instance, in some cases, for some of the projects in Nigeria, sometimes you might want to add some, because they want the literature to be voluminous. They just add all the necessary and the unnecessary things. You see them put. That's when they were talking about the history. They did not ask them how secondary school was formulated in. If you ask you, do you get? So just focus on what is important to your study. Though. You want to ask any question again?
Sir, that
Go
of
ahead,
the
please.
empirical, sir.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
What is wrong?
That of
What's
the
the problem with
empirical
it?
review. Under the
Yeah.
empirical review, you made mention that we can compare the work of Mr. Efe with the work of Sola.
Yeah.
Now, how do you want to compare? That
Okay.
is
For
where I'm.
instance, all right. All right. For instance, if Mr. Ife has carried out a study before in Oshogbo
Okay.
about how the level of stress students go through to get to school, it's making some of them get late to class, getting tired in class, that they were not able to concentrate to learn, and it's really showing in their academic performance.
Okay.
And Mr. Emmanuel in Akwa Ibom have discussed something related.
Okay.
You can bring those two studies together. Say, okay, Mr. Ife did a study in Oshogbo to examine the so, and how it
Yes.
affected academic performance. And the study find out that getting late to school as a result of trekking long distance to class is
Okay.
is causing stress, both
Yes.
physical and mental stress on the student, and is making them perform below expectation. So
Okay.
to further buttress this, another study carried out by Mr. Emmanuel in Akwa Ibom,
Okay, sir.
looking at how environment that students are learning is causing them stress and is
Okay.
relating to academic performance, showed that.
Okay.
So this implies that both both Emmanuel 2025 study and Ife study of Oshogbo is pointing
Yes.
to one direction, that different level of academic sales depend, even as diverse their locations were, shows
Okay.
that I think there's something related to how this academic stress, how this stress students go through, affect the academic performance.
Okay.
And if there are studies that have contradict that, you bring them on board too. It's
Okay.
like you are trying to create an argument, okay, or after you have said that, okay, you now say, on the other hand, Ruth study in Lagos has shown that students don't necessarily come down with stress despite trekking a longer distance, and they still perform well in their academics. Maybe there are other factors that authors need to look at that weren't looked at, and they make them conclude that It's only the stress students experience in school that make them perform low.
Okay.
So you are just trying to create an argument with all of these writings.
Okay. 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 That is what you call critics.
Yes, now you are criticizing their work.
Okay.
Yeah, we call it critical analysis of the work.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Ruth, you want to ask a question?
Yes.
All right, go
After
ahead.
talking about we already know that stress is a concept, academic stress and academic performance. So I feel that when we talk about this first, that we can still talk about how it influences the performance before moving to other area, before moving to the theoretical area. Am I right?
No, now how it influences performance should be what you talk about in your empirical review of literature. That's where you bring in, yes, thank you for reminding me. That's where you bring in what your objectives looks like, factors in your objective or variables in your objective into your discussion as subheadings under empirical review of literature. So that's where you bring in maybe each of your objective, maybe trekking long distance to class or trekking long distance to school affects student academics. So you can say how impact of long distance trek and student academic performance is still under academic stress. So you now bring that to under empirical review and review studies in that area, maybe 4, 5, 7, depending on how much you want, how much argument you want to create. You
So
get
it
that,
is our
please?
okay, sorry. It is our purpose of study that we are bringing into the empirical.
Yes,
Yes.
those things you listed, or either your research question or purpose of this or specific objective, you look at those variables one by one and bring them down to your empirical review. You want to go and review studies in that light. If you notice something, that shows that there will be a connection. That is your number. Chapter 1 is connecting to chapter 2. For instance, you've talked about the concept. That concept is from those concepts you form your objective, your specific objectives. It's from those concepts you generate the list of objectives you're going to focus on in the study, right? So
Yes.
when you get to theory, we're talking about what theory can help you further explain what you're talking about in your study. And those theory won't be leaving out your variables that you've mentioned as objective in chapter 1. So after you've talked about those stories, you now move to empirical review. You are now going back to those objectives you've listed, picking the variables in those objectives to go and do empirical review on them. What our study across board talked about, linking this variable to the other one. So you see that you are still touching base with your chapter 1, despite the fact that you are in chapter 2. So that's how you should be linking it till you get to chapter 5.
Okay,
I
I
hope
get
that
it. Thank you. Yes, yes. Thank you.
any other question, please. All right. So I think I want to stop here tonight. Don't let me overboard you with so many things. Chapter 3 next week, we'll now have we'll have to sit down very well. Because that chapter 3, I'm going to teach you how you can design an instrument. What is a research instrument? How to use research instruments. You know, when we talk about research instruments, I won't dwell so much in chapter 3. Let me just quickly do a rundown. In chapter 3, we have what we call research method. Some people call it research methodology. We have the research design, or some people call it the research the method. We have participants in the study. We have sample or sampling techniques. We have research instruments. We have justification for your use of research instrument or research design. Some people call it research method, philosophy, research philosophy. That comes after research method sometimes, just to check what philosophy is guiding this research design you are using. If you check some of the videos on my YouTube page, I think in our last training, I took time to talk about research designs, different types of design. So this is where you bring them to use. So if you're talking about this design, okay, I think it was better for this. By the time you're stating the topic, you're already putting it in your mind. Until you now start doing literature review, that some of those things might change. Already you have an idea of, okay, I think this kind of design will work better when I want to collect data for this study. To start thinking about it. So that shows that you must be knowledgeable about research design, which I've talked about in some of our videos. You can go check the YouTube, you see them there. So so after the population sample size research instrument, now under the instrument, there are quite a number of things that could happen. For people in social science and education, you might use instruments, and even in management, you can use instruments. But we have what we call types of instruments. We have self-structured instruments, we have semi-structured instruments, we have adapted instruments, and we have adopted instruments. You know, there are standardized instruments. Now, adopted instruments are standardized instruments that have been used before and been tested, proven that it can be used to assess any variable. As in, not just any variable. I mean, for instance, sorry, it can be used to assess variables under any condition. Sorry, that's what I was meant to say. For instance, this academic stress as a variable that we're talking about, there will be standardized instruments online that are being used, that have been created many years ago. It might be recent as well, that have been created to examine academic stress, to assess academic stress. It might have been tested across countries, have been used by authors, scholars in different countries. So those kind of instruments, if it's fitting into what you're talking about, you're able to lay your hands on any of them and they are free for you to use. You will, if the environment they've used it is not too way different from yours, or you have seen research that have used it in your type of environment, or you quote that kind of a person to support your arguments for the reasons why you want to use that instrument. That is the reason why you want to adopt. When we talk about adopting instrument, you are taking an instrument hook, line, and sinker the way it was designed to use, and it's not plagiarism, please. When we call it, we are using adapted instrument. You take a standardized instrument that has been designed, has been proven, tested, and you now adapt it. For instance, maybe you're talking about academic stress. That instrument, the instrument you are able to find online or in a library, is primarily the one that has been designed only for people in US. And you feel a part of it is relevant to your work, so you want to use it. You can adapt that kind of instrument. What does that adaptation means is you now look at the lines of words, the statements made in each of those items, and relate it to Nigerian situation. So with that being said, if you relate it to Nigerian situation, you are adapting it, because some of those words will change, but ensure that you don't lose the meaning. So you can adapt it, because why you need to adapt it to, there are some words that Nigerians, students in secondary school that you want to ask to participate in the study might not be used to, they might not even understand what it means. And it might have been used in that instrument because it was primarily made for students in the US. So when you're adapting such instrument, you look at those words, you look at how their sentences were coined, understanding what the sentence means. If you need to adjust something to be able to for it to be able, for your respondent down here to be able to understand what you really mean by those statements. So when you are doing things like that to a standardized instrument, you are adapting it. Adopting it is taking it the way it is, but adapting it is trying to adjust those words, the statement, to make sure it suits your audience. Your knowledge of your audience here will help you in shaping how you adjust those sentences in a research instrument to suit them. So Structured questionnaire is self-structured questionnaire is when you design an instrument by yourself. Such instrument you are meant to, if you are designing your instrument yourself, you are meant to test the consistency of that instrument, which is called, we call it reliability test. Validity test too. We have two types of tests when you want to confirm if your instrument is good, your self-designed instrument. Sometimes you do it for standardized instrument as well to test if the instrument is suitable here. I will tell you what we do when we want to do test of instruments is like that. We call it reliability. We call it pilot study. That's where pilot study comes in. So, for instance, you are looking at the effect of stress, academic stress on student academic performance in Education District 4 of Lagos State. So if you want to do a pilot study of that instrument, if you design it yourself, you have to go to, okay, pick student, SS1 student as well, but not in Education District 4 of Lagos State. You can go to maybe Education District 3 and pick a set of students in that same class with the same condition. What do I mean by condition? If you are using public school for your original study, your pilot study should be public school students as well. So when you pick such kind of people, it may be in another education district, you go to, when you do that, you want to test that instrument on them first. There's what we call, there's a type of analysis you do when you want to do a reliability test. We call it Cronbach Alpha. Can do their method of analysis, their method of pilot test. We have one we call test retest method. All of these things we are going to talk about it just in a brief by next week. So instrument is a powerful one. Then for people that don't, let me excuse this. After the instrument, maybe I will go back to that. After the instrument, we have what we call method of data collection. How are you going to distribute your questionnaire? Is it online? Is it physical? Depending on the kind of study you're doing. Then we move from method of data collection to method of data analysis. What analytical tool are you going to use? What statistical tool do you think is suitable to test what you want to test or do a descriptive analysis of what you want to do a descriptive of? All of these things I'm saying is most applicable to people in education, people, students in management, students in social sciences. But even from those students in social sciences and management, for instance, students in economics, students in finance, students in maybe accounting, their own way of research method might be a bit different. By the time they put the research method, they talk about the research designs and all of those things. The next thing they want to talk about, some of them might want to define their variable. Aside that, the next thing they might want to do is to now create a model specification. So what is the model specification for your study? There's a way you create a model. I might not be able to explain that right now, but you create a model for your study. And this is done majorly if you are using a secondary data. Yeah, using a secondary data for people in some in finance, some in economics, and all of that. For instance, what Mr. Ife asked us when we talk about youth unemployment and Nigerian economic situation. If you are not looking at a perception, a perceived response from people, and you want to go full-time secondary data, that kind of a study, you have to create a model. Now, this is what literature review do for you. Literature review will help you see studies that look alike. Studies, they don't have to be 100% of what you are talking about. They will give you clue on how to design a model specification for your study, a secondary study. So you can look at it, okay, what variables, how do they adapt their variable, how they use their variable in creating this model, what model did they use and why did they pick that model? You know, all of those things, co-integration analysis, that's where all of those things, unit truth test, and all of those things comes in for people using secondary data. So like I was saying, putting all of those things in place, when you want to use primary data collection process, what tools are you going to use to analyze such data? You are using secondary data for your study. What tools are you going to use in analyzing them? So all of those things you must understand the need for them and how to put them into appropriate use. So, but next week I will now dig a little deeper with chapter 3, just to show us. Maybe we might practically design a questionnaire just for a test and see how it looks like. Then we might as well search for a question online. I'm not really using any book or any PowerPoint, but I just want to teach you based on what I know and what has been using for so many years right now. So if you have a question, please let me know. Any question, please. So I will close tonight.
So are we to go on with chapter 2 based on our previous assignment?
You can attempt it. I will mean it on the chapter 1 assignment you do. Send it to us. Send it to everyone by Monday. So you can go and try, give it a try. Let's see what you can do. If I will then correct and let you know where you should improve on.
Okay, like how many pages for the chapter 2?
Please don't make it voluminous.
That's why I'm asking.
Just give me 5 pages for all. It's okay.
Okay.
And 1.5 time New Roman 12. Do you get that?
Yes. 1.5, right?
Yes.
Size 12. Size 12.
Yes.
Yes,
Time New
yes.
Roman is fine. So quickly is able to be easy and I'll be able to digest it fast and quickly minute if I need to.
I type from phone anyway.
You said?
I typed from my phone.
All right, no problem. All right. Any other questions? Any question? The floor is open if you have a question. Idem, any question?
None for now, sir.
All right. Well, if you have any question, you can private chat me sometimes, ask me question. If I can't type, I can do a voice note and send them to you. Maybe while in the course of your writing, may run into challenges. I might not answer you immediately, but as soon as I am able to, if I can't type, I will send voice notes just to guide you. Anything like that.
Okay, like when can we submit the chapter 2?
If it's ready by Wednesday, I will be fine. Should I still post this video on YouTube?
Hey.
Yes, sir. Please.
Yes, sir.
What did you say?
Right.
What did you say? What did you say?
I said, should I still post this video on YouTube?
Post it to post it.
All right. So in the absence of none, I want us to call it a day this evening. I'm a bit tired. I need to go and rest.
Thank you, sir.
I still have another meeting for 10 p.m. tonight. So let me rest a bit then.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. God bless you.
Yeah. So please enjoy the rest of the
you,
day.
sir.
If you have any question, if you don't know my number, ask for Idem on the platform. Idem knows my number, or she will send you to me, or she will show you my number. So just chat me. I have my one of my number on the
Sorry, sir. Hello, sir.
YouTube. Okay, go ahead, please.
You define a hypothesis just briefly.
I said it's a tentative statement.
Okay.
So what hypothesis is to test the significance. Is a way to test, is a predictive way of testing if there is a relationship. Is a statement just to show if you have any common thing between two variables, or maybe there is a difference. There are different kind of hypotheses you can state. We have two types. We have null and we have alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis is talking about what will not be, while the alternative is talking about what will be. So you're saying there will be no significant, or there is no significant relationship For basic class, for basic research writing, they will say that when we're growing up, sorry, I was starting this journey, I used to hear one lecturer says that a statement of hypothesis must have significant. That word significant, if it is not there, it's not yet a statement of hypothesis. I'm sorry to say, it's no longer tenable. It's not factual again. There are statements of hypothesis in psychology that you won't say anything like significance there. But we have null hypothesis, we have alternate hypothesis. Null is talking about the negative hypothesis, while the alternate is talking about the positive hypothesis. There's what we now call this thing just escaped my mind right now. If you're supposed to, when you get your results and your result is significant, you are at default, you are meant to state your null hypothesis. NULL is what we call null hypothesis. You are supposed to state your null hypothesis at default. Then alternate is just the opposite of that hypothesis that was stated. For instance, if you say there is no significant relationship between academic stress and student academic performance, so that's null. The alternate will be there is a significant relationship between academic stress and student academic performance. But there's what we call type 1 error, and we have type 2 error. Now, type 1 error is when you do when you carry out your analysis. Don't worry, you will still understand it when we do it practically. When you carry out your analysis, you did the analysis, you use the appropriate statistical software, you analyze it, you pick up appropriate statistical tool for analysis. For instance, if you're testing relationship, you are looking at relation between academic stress and student academic performance relationship. So you use what we call, maybe since it's a one variable to one independent variable to one dependent variable, then you might be looking at if it's a relation between those, you might be looking at correlation analysis. So Pearson product correlation analysis. Why do I need to pick correlation analysis? I will tell you the criteria when we get to that point. When you're doing such analysis, you now get your results, and your results shows that your SIG value, don't worry, don't let me bore you. We'll get to that when we get to that. Maybe your SIG value is less than 0.05, which is a decision-making factor. When your SIG value is less than 0.05, it shows that your analysis is significant. So when it is significant like that, you are supposed to reject the null hypothesis. When you reject the null hypothesis, then you take the alternate as your final decision based on that test of hypothesis. So if you now not do it that way, where you are supposed to reject the null hypothesis, you now went to take the null hypothesis, you will say you have committed a type 1 error. Don't worry, don't let me bore you. This is a process that looks cumbersome, but I will break it down a step at a time when we get to analysis. So there's type 1 error, there's type 2 error. I will tell you practically what those things were. I hope you get me, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Any other question, please? All right. In the absence of none, I want to say good evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening. We see next week in class. So, but you can reach out to me if you have any private questions.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Good.
Eden, thank you very much for making this class possible. See you
Good night,
next
sir.
week. Good
Good
night.
night, sir. Good night.